changing that broken power steering pump here, and it's not a big job at all. All we need is 15/16, so we'll get that on our tensioner pulley. We're gonna go clockwise on that, loosen that belt off, we'll get the serpentine belt off of here. Once the belt is off, we can freewheel this pulley. Inside there, that's going to be the 1/2-inch socket to remove the 3 bolts, and we got the holes in the pulley to access that. So that's going to remove the power steering pump off of the bracket that's connected to the block there. And then we have 2 connections here. So this should be our high pressure side here. This could be a 5/8 combo wrench to break that loose, take that off. And then down in here, I got it doubled up here. I got a pinch clamp and a gear clamp on there, so a pair of pliers, and likely that's going to be like a 1/4 inch or whatever the end of the screw is, either a Phillips or a flathead screw. And what I did was I removed the air cleaner box out of this area here, and all that is, as you can see right here, there's just 3 fasteners in there to remove that out of the way, so we can get in here at these clamps a little easier. We noticed the old one where the pulley is flush with the edge of the shaft here on there, and on the new one we noticed that this pulley was back a little bit. Now in all honesty, if we took a look from the space from the canister here to the edge of the sheave, this part actually doesn't look bad, right, as compared to this one here when the pulley was still on there. They look pretty close. So I think that's what was happening, was when they installed it, they went with this dimension here rather than to have that flush with the end of the shaft. So anyway, we install this new pump on there, and then we take a look and we're checking things out. And all I did was just use a straight edge here, and I put it across the edges of the sheave, and I compared that down to where the crank pulley is down here. So I basically put those across like that, and I'm checking to see how parallel those sheaves are. And what ended up happening was, it was like about 3/16. I measured about 3/16. This is in 3/16. Now if you take a look, that's very close to the 3/16. It's a little bit more than what that space is, but if we put this back to where it's flush or level with the end of the shaft, it should be good. The sheaves and pulleys should all be lined up properly. As same with last time, we get the puller here. See those little half rounds in there? Well, those wrap around into this groove here, and then what I do is I just take a 3/8 bolt and I just screw that down in there. That's what it's threaded for 3/8. And then you just use the puller here, and you're supposed to be able to pull the sheave off or up. And again, it keeps slipping off. It doesn't work. Well, here was the old one here, and we couldn't get it off on the old one here either. So what ended up happening was it's kind of like a carbon fiber kind of material in here. And so this is that broken one from before where we busted that off of there. But so this is like a carbon kind of material, and it does not want to come off of there. And this one is steel, and it still slips off. Like, we broke this free, and this is what you're ending up with. So this is kind of like that's cast around this metal piece. That's what you're grabbing on when you're trying to pull it off of there. This was still on there after we had busted the carbon fiber pulley all around it. We'd taken that off, and then we used our puller here, but now instead of the top groove, we put it in the bottom groove there, and we were actually able to get this off on this one here. So going back to this, will not come off, just keeps slipping off there. What are we gonna do? I measured in between these 3 holes. So what I did was I got a circle. I measured a circle so they're concentric or consistent all the way around, and then I measured the centers between these holes, and that's where I put my points, and then I just step drill those holes until we get to a 3/8. So then I just tack these 3/8 nuts on there, and now the plan is to use this this 3 puller here. He's got 3 studs that are going to go in there, and then hopefully that will pull this thing up and flush to the end here. Even if this wasn't our issue where I'm trying to level that out, even if this was just an old one and you're having the same problems and you can't get it off, you could kind of do the same thing here. Do those measurements, drill those holes, tack those nuts on there, use a different puller, pull that off. We just pulled it up and we flushed it out there with the edge of the shaft, and now when we install it, everything should line up. Once this is set properly, now it shouldn't take much at all. It's just a reverse of before. We've got our 3 bolts that we're going to put in through here with the 1/2-inch head on there. Bolt that on. Going to hook up our return hose, and we're going to hook up our high pressure line right there. And after everything's all hooked up, then we just put the serpentine belt back on. We've reinstalled the power steering pump here once we've moved that shiv out flush with the shaft, and we've got everything set up. One thing to notice is that because this pulley is a little larger in diameter, it's a little tighter getting our serpentine belt on. So basically our tensioner had to come all the way over for the end of its travel before we could get that belt back on there. I figure now is just as good a time as any to flush the system. So we've got our high pressure hose hooked up to the pump, and then we've got our return hose, and what I did was I disconnected the return. I just got a chunk of hose and it goes up past the pump, so it's higher than the fill level there. I took the return hose from there and then I connected it to another piece of hose, and I just have that clamped to the ice cream bucket there. And then what I do is I lift up the front of the Jeep with the jack, so get them tires up off the ground, so it's just easier to turn the wheel. We're just going to turn the wheel back and forth, and we're going to drain all the fluid out of there without starting the vehicle. While we're doing that, we'll keep an eye on our level here. We'll make sure that we keep topping up the fluid until we've got it all flushed and drained, and then new fluid inside there. I'm using ATF fluid. The reason I'm using ATF fluid is because, one, I want to reduce the amount of fluids that we have for the vehicle. If you use ATF fluid, then that's one less fluid that you have to buy for the vehicle, like a separate power steering fluid. ATF is used for hydraulics. It's used in hydraulic rams, and this is a hydraulic system, and it's kind of a tip that was passed down to me from an old mechanic that I used to work with. Works just as good. In fact, if you do a comparison between ATF and power steering fluid, if you're to look at the specific makeup of that oil, they're very similar. We finished flushing that power steering pump. We got our return hose hooked up here. The last thing to do is just leave your cap open, and then just keep turning your wheel side to side to get all the air purged out of the system. And then once you're satisfied you've done that, then you just want to fill it up to your cold fill line on here. And the last thing to do then is to put in our air box, and that part is done. So next, what we've done here is we've filled up our antifreeze in our system here. And if you remember, I've got that valve back here. So I got this valve which goes down into the intake there, and then it connects onto our hose that goes to the heater core, and this is going to be our vent. Here's the last piece here where we've got our valve open just enough to have the fluid at the top here, and we've got everything closed up except for this spot so that the air's bleeding out of there. You can see it. So you got little air bubbles coming out, and we'll just let that run like that until we get as much air out of the system as we can. And it's my belief once we've achieved that, then we're going to have, really hot heat coming out of the vents in there. So this is the whole purpose, to put this nipple on here, high point, higher than the top rad hose, and then the air goes to the highest point and comes out of there. So it's got to rag around here because it's going to slowly, it might burp and slowly get some fluid come out. We don't want that on our alternator or nothing. So that's working pretty good. It's running pretty good with that timing advanced. Don't have any troubles that way. Don't see any other leaks or problems. Last thing to do after we bled out all that air from that nipple, we just remove that nipple and then we just put a plug in there just to be sure that we're not going to have any problems in the future where that somehow gets opened and release our coolant out of the system.